Welcome to the DX Today Expert Report. Today, we're diving into one of the most persistent anxieties of the modern era, the fear that artificial intelligence is coming to take our jobs. We've all seen the headlines. We've all heard the predictions of mass unemployment. But a new deep dive white paper from our editorial team suggests we might be looking at the equation entirely backward.
It is definitely the prevailing narrative.
But when you actually look at the macroeconomic data, specifically looking ahead to 2026 and beyond, that fear is based on what economists call the lump of labor fallacy.
That's the idea that there is a fixed amount of work to be done in the world, right? So if a machine does it, a human doesn't.
Exactly. It assumes a static economy, but the economy isn't static. The reality we are facing isn't a surplus of workers. It's a massive global labor supply shock. 5 billion.
That effectively changes the role of AI from a job killer to something else entirely.
Precisely. Leading economists from the IMF to Goldman Sachs are now arguing that AI is arriving just in time. It's not a displacer, it's a stabilizer. In advanced economies like Japan, Germany, and increasingly here in the US, we are running out of people. So AI becomes a labor reinstater and an augmenter.
It protects GDP growth that would otherwise flatline because there simply aren't enough bodies to fill the seats. It comes from the work of MIT economists Darren Acemoglu and Pasquale Restrepo. It's a crucial distinction for understanding this shift. It is the definitive framework. Historically, you have two forces. The displacement effect, where automation replaces a task. Think of an elevator operator being replaced by a button.
But then you have the reinstatement effect, where technology creates new tasks that require human labor, like the elevator repair technician or the security monitoring service.
And historically, those balanced out. The Industrial Revolution displaced weavers but created engineers. But Acemoglu had some concerns recently, didn't he?
He did. Think of self-checkout kiosks at the grocery store. They displace labor, but they don't really boost productivity enough to create complex new roles. However, David Otter's work from 2024 suggests generative AI is fundamentally different.
It has the potential to rebuild the middle class, not hollow it out, because it lowers the barrier to entry for high-stakes decision-making.
Right, it's the O-ring theory. If you give a nurse practitioner an AI diagnostic tool, they can suddenly perform tasks that used to be reserved for specialized doctors. You are upskilling a massive portion of the workforce practically overnight. You aren't replacing the nurse. You are making the nurse more valuable because the labor market is so tight.
That aligns with the data we're seeing from the IMF.
And that's why companies, smart ones anyway, are hoarding talent. In an aging demographic, hiring a replacement is becoming mathematically impossible. You don't fire the worker, you buy them the AI tool so they can do the work of two people, because you can't find a second person to hire.
This brings us to a fascinating intersection between AI and immigration. But AI is changing the mechanics of that too.
It is effectively dismantling the language barrier. AI, or the real-time translation systems from Google and Microsoft.
We are reaching a point where a non-native speaker can enter the workforce and integrate instantly, bypassing years of language training.
There was a study by Brynjolfsson regarding this, specifically looking at call centers.
Yes, the NBER study. They found that generative AI significantly increased productivity, but the gains were massive for the least skilled and least experienced workers. It allows an immigrant or a junior employee to catch up to native productivity levels almost immediately.
So AI acts as a bridge, but it's also reshaping where the work happens.
We've spent decades in a cycle of globalization driven by labor arbitrage, moving jobs to where wages are cheapest. And that era is ending. If a robot or an AI agent is doing the production, the cost of labor becomes a much smaller slice of the pie. It costs roughly the same to run an AI in Detroit as it does in Shenzhen. Companies are bringing manufacturing closer to the consumer to reduce supply chain fragility because the cheap labor advantage of offshoring is eroding.
However, we have to be careful not to fall into techno-utopianism here. Automation is difficult.
That is a critical lesson. A few years ago, Adidas tried to build fully robotic factories in Germany and the US to eliminate the need for Asian labor. They failed. They shut them down.
Why did they fail?
Inflexibility. The robots could make one type of shoe very efficiently, but as soon as fashion changed or they needed complexity, the robots couldn't cope.
Human hands in Asia were simply more adaptable. The lesson for reshoring is that the technology must be flexible. Vision systems in 2026 are much smarter than they were in 2019, but the capital expenditure and integration risks are still huge. It's not a magic wand.
Let's look at who is getting it right. The report details a case study from Japan, specifically Sampo Care. Japan is really the canary in the coal mine for these demographic shifts.
Japan is facing a shortfall of nearly 700,000 care workers by 2040. It's a crisis. Instead of just throwing bodies at the problem, they are using AI to predict health declines before they happen.
They're moving from reactive to proactive care.
Exactly. They partnered with TytoCare for remote exams, and they use sensors and paraseals, robotic companions, to handle monitoring. This isn't about replacing nurses. It's about the fact that paperwork and monitoring consume 40% of a nurse's shift. If AI handles that, the dwindling number of human nurses can focus on holding patients' hands and providing empathy. It's the only way the math works.
That empathy piece is key, the human-centric tasks. But then we have the other side of the coin, specifically in the global call center industry. Ally AI earlier, they have a tool that neutralizes accents in real time.
This is where the economics meets ethical tension. Sanos developed speech-to-speech AI that makes a caller in Manila sound like they are in Kansas. From a business metric standpoint, it's incredible. Constantly.
And retention went up too.
It did. Agent satisfaction rose by 25% because they stopped getting abused by biased callers. But critics call this the white voice effect. It erases identity.
Economically, though, it lubricates the friction of globalized labor. It makes offshore teams feel onshore to the customer.
Speaking of onshore, let's look at California's agricultural sector. This is a clear example of the reinstatement effect in action.
The U.S. ag sector is short about 85,000 workers a year. Migration from Mexico has slowed down significantly because Mexico's population is aging too. So desperation is driving automation. You have companies like Bonsai Robotics deploying harvesting bots.
But these aren't just simple pickers.
No, and that's the reinstatement angle. These robots require fleets of technicians to maintain them. The interesting thing is who is filling those jobs. It's the younger generation of farm families. The kids who refuse to do manual picking are happy to be robot technicians. It's a better job.
But there is a regulatory hurdle there, isn't there?
Huge. California OSHA regulations were written in the 1970s. They still require human oversight for autonomous machinery. It's a bottleneck.
It's like the red flag acts when cars were first invented, requiring a man to walk in front of the car with a flag. We have 2026 technology governed by 1975 rules. So looking forward, from now until, say, 2030, what does this transition look like?
We are going to see a J-curve of productivity. It will be painful in the short term for administrative and junior-level cognitive roles, coders, copywriters, basic analysts. Those tasks are being absorbed, but unemployment will likely remain low because those people will be sucked into the vacuum left by retiring boomers.
And long term? 2050 and beyond?
As the global population stabilizes and declines, AI becomes the primary engine of GDP. The dependency ratio will be managed not by taxing more workers, because they won't exist, but by taxing the productivity dividend of the robots, roles that require complex care, empathy, and creative strategy, all supported by an AI backbone. If you are firing people in a labor shortage world, you are making a strategic error. You should be using AI to redeploy staff to higher value tasks, like Sampoteg.
And for policymakers, it sounds like regulatory reform is urgent.
Absolutely. We need to update safety regulations to allow autonomous systems to actually function. And we need to think about tax incentives that favor labor augmenting AI, technology that makes people smarter, rather than just labor replacing automation.
It's a complete reframing of the narrative. We are entering a labor deficit economy, and in that world, AI isn't the iceberg we're going to hit. It's the life raft.
That is the bottom line.
A sobering but ultimately hopeful perspective. Mike, thank you for walking us through this report.
My pleasure, Alex.
And thank you to our audience for listening to the DX Today Expert Report. You can find the full white paper and the datasets we discussed on our website. We'll see you next time.